Happy Wednesday. Uh, this is the middle of the week that we're talking about dialogue. This past Monday, we talked about how dialogue could help us just with exposition, giving some of that background information and knowledge that we need for the story. Today, we're going to talk about a different way to use dialogue, and that is using dialogue to reveal conflict in the story. So conflict is another really important element. And remember that what we're going for here is to be able to have characters speak and converse with one another without just getting bogged down in what I call small talk, that kind of meaningless, boring stuff that nobody really cares for, but using dialogue in ways that's really going to push the story forward. So one way we do that is we have the characters reveal exposition. Another way that we do that is have the dialogue reveal conflict. So at this point, if you haven't done so already, you should get yourself ready for notes. Pause here and start me back up once you're ready. So let's start off, first of all, by talking about what conflict is. I've taken this picture from Romeo and Juliet. We've got Romeo stabbing Tybalt. That's obviously, it's built out of conflict, right? We know intrinsically, as human beings, we know what conflict is. But when we're writing fiction, there's a little bit more that we need to know about it. So it's not just, oh, look, the characters are fighting, that's conflict, although that is one form of conflict. There's a lot more to it. So I'll start by defining what external conflict is. And external conflict is an example of that is the picture that we have over here of Romeo stabbing Tybalt. And what external conflict is good for is it's really good for short-term engagement. When you're reading the book and there is some kind of battle, then you're engaged with that external conflict, or there's a car chase, or there's a fight, or whatever it ends up being. That's really good for short-term engagement, but it's not so good for the long haul, right? Like if there was a battle that lasted 150 pages, you'd eventually kind of tune out, like, oh, okay, whatever, or you've seen the movies where, the scene just goes on a little too long, the conflict loses its steam a little bit. Those are all almost always external conflicts. So those will be between characters, when there's a character facing off against another character, when they have something between them that prevents them from being in harmony. The other form of external conflict that we're going to think about right now, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but oftentimes there's a character versus nature. So not another person per se, but something out in the environment the character might be squaring off against. Maybe they're caught out in a snowstorm, or whatever. That could also be an external conflict. So again, external conflict really good for short-term engagement. Now, the other part of conflict is the internal conflict. And what the internal conflict is good for is this long-term investment. So when we have a character who has an internal conflict, uh, we know that they're being kind of torn in two directions, right? That's what the picture is about. That there's the devil on their shoulder and the angel on their shoulder, and which one are they going to listen to? Maybe they have to make a choice, and we are along for that ride. Are they able to make that choice? Do they make the right choice? We care about them as people, and that's where we get, when we start caring about the characters as people, that's where we start getting that long-term investment, rather than the short-term engagement of external conflict. So when we talk about internal conflict, we're talking about the character versus themselves. Sometimes, the character will have this that thing that's tearing them apart, right? That's the devil and the angel on their shoulder. And we can talk about that in terms of what the character wants versus what the character needs. There, a good character, especially your main character, is always going to have an internal conflict between what they want and what they need. So you need to be clear on what are those things. Um, and what this is going to facilitate in your story is character change. You'll remember last week I talked about the importance of having a character change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. Well, if the character is struggling between what they want and what they need, then that's a conflict that has to be resolved by the end of the story. And it's probably going to require the character to make a decision that's going to change something about who they are. They go from being this person that we think they are to being almost a new person by the end. They learn something by the end, right? And that's really, really important. One great way to clarify what this conflict is, so what is it that the character wants versus what the character needs, is through the character's dialogue with other characters. So when we talk about conflict, a great way, and rather than just writing it out, oh, this character wants this but needs that, you have them speak about these internal conflicts with other characters. And it, again, pushes the story forward in a way that the story is not just getting bogged down in small talk. So let's look at an example. This is an example from the story Lamb to the Slaughter, which we read early on this year. This is the story about Mary Maloney, and she kills her husband with the rack of lamb, and ultimately, you know, cooks the lamb and serves it to the police officers, right? So I just picked out a small set of dialogue from the beginning. What I'd also like you to focus on, aside from just the internal conflict that's going on for Mary, is also just how Roald Dahl sprinkles in these character actions as well throughout to kind of add depth to the dialogue. It's not just them speaking back and forth, but they're actually moving around the room and acting, doing things as they're speaking, which makes it feel a little bit more natural. So look at that, as well as how the internal conflict is revealed here. It says, her husband paused a moment, leaning forward in the chair. Then he got up and went slowly over to fetch himself another drink. I'll get it, she cried, jumping up. Sit down, he said. When he came back, she noticed that the new drink was dark amber with the quantity of whiskey in it. Darling, shall I get your slippers? No. She watched him as he began to sip the dark yellow drink, and she could see a little oily swirls in the liquid because it was so strong. I think it's a shame, she said, that when a policeman gets to be as senior as you, they keep him walking about on his feet all day long. He didn't answer, so she bent her head again and went on with her sewing. But each time he lifted the drink to his lips, she heard the ice cubes clinking against the side of the glass. Darling, she said, would you like me to get some cheese? I haven't made any supper because it's Thursday. No, he said. If you're too tired to eat out, she went on, it's still not too late. There's plenty of meat and stuff in the freezer, and you can have it right here and not even move out of the chair. Her eyes waited on him for an answer, a smile, a little nod, but he made no sign. So this short conversation between them, it's actually kind of a one-sided conversation between them, tells us a lot about their relationship. It reveals some external conflict between them, but it also reveals a lot about what's going on inside Mary's head. So how is this dialogue revealing Mary Maloney's inner conflict? Well, I would say that it shows us that she wants to make her husband happy, right? She keeps offering him all these things that she perceives as being the things that he needs in order to be happy. What she needs is a little bit more hidden, but you can tell from the way that she's talking to him that she needs appreciation for her efforts. He keeps blowing her off. She keeps offering more and more things because she wants him to be happy, but she also needs to be acknowledged or appreciated for those efforts. Now, that conflict inside of Mary, the desire to make her husband happy and the need to be appreciated for it, eventually turns into an external conflict. We get her, bludgeoning him over the head with the frozen lamb, and then we also get the cover up, right? That's all external conflict. She doesn't want to get in trouble with the police and all that stuff. So this internal conflict leads to an external conflict, but that external conflict leads back to the internal resolution for Mary, because at the end of the story, when the police enjoy the dinner and they're joking about, how the murder weapon must be right under their noses, and it turns out that they're actually eating it as they enjoy it, that she gets what she wants and what she needs, as well as she gets away with the murder, right? She doesn't necessarily make her husband happy at the end, but she certainly makes the other men happy, the policemen happy, and she gets a ton of appreciation for her efforts. They eat the dinner, they enjoy the dinner, um, and at the same time, she's able to wrap up the external conflict because there's no more evidence of what could possibly have happened to her husband. So this small piece of dialogue here that I've shared with you, revealing what she wants and what she needs, really goes a long way in setting up the rest of the story and understanding the story on kind of a deeper character-driven level of Mary getting what she wants and what she needs, and why the external conflict ends up being what it is. So as we move forward into tomorrow's practice, what I want you to think about is, what does your character want? And how is what your character wants different from what they need? If it's not, then you don't have a compelling internal conflict, right? You need an internal conflict for your character so that they can grow beyond it at the end of the story. So if what your character wants is the same as what they need, I think you need to think a little bit more carefully about those two things, and uh, maybe switch it up a little bit. And then also consider, how could a conversation with another character reveal this conflict? So how could it be that your character could just have a conversation with another character that's going to bring out the difference between what they want and what they need? I'm excited to see what you come up with, and I'll see you back here soon.